name is Dan Rayburn, the conference chairman. I'm going to be doing this session today by myself, this presentation. A little bit of background here on this session. This is a session I've been doing. I actually started doing it at the Streaming Media East and West show every year, so maybe this is the 6th or 7th year I've done it. The reason I put out pricing on the market is I get so many questions about how much these services actually cost in the market. And the pricing I'm going to be talking about today is specific to video delivery. So if you're looking for a contract for small object delivery, mobile content acceleration, app acceleration, this is not the pricing you can go by. I have that pricing as well, and I'm happy to share that with you afterwards. But this pricing today, like the presentation says, is specific to video delivery. Probably the most interesting thing about video delivery today is that it takes up the largest percentage of traffic on a CDN's network, but it contributes the least amount of profitable revenue. So it takes up all those bits, but it's not as profitable as other services in the market. I deal with a lot of customers. I'm going to talk about the data I'm going to show today and where it comes from, but as I said this morning, for at least the last 10 years, maybe close to 15 now, I've been providing free advice at streamingmedia.com to any company or any person at any time. So I take calls all hours of the night sometimes from customers all over the world who want help on which CDN to use, what the differences in the technology are, what the going rate is for pricing, and that is something that I provide for free. I'm not a consultant to the CDNs. I'm not a consultant to the companies. I don't take a percentage of any type of contracts. Some companies in the industry do provide a service where they'll help you save money with your CDN contract, and they'll take a percentage of what they help you save. We don't do that at streamingmedia.com. We're just a free resource. As a result of providing that resource to the industry, those customers also share with me their pricing data. So between the surveys we do and the customers I talk to and the customers like yourselves, many of you that I see in person across 3 or 4 shows a year, I'm probably collecting data from about 2,000 customers. The pricing I'm going to show today is from about over 800 customers that I just did a survey on in March. So that's how I collect most of my data. While the CDNs, almost all the CDNs talk to me and give me an idea on pricing and what they're seeing in trends, obviously the data I care the most about comes from customers directly. So if you have any questions on CDN pricing, you can always contact me for that. I'm always willing to share that. I also keep anonymous the data I have. So you'll see the data that I've collected is amongst a lot of different companies, but I don't list the companies they're from. But I talk to the largest companies you can think of providing OTT content to the smallest. I also provide pricing not just for media entertainment like we're talking about today, but also for enterprise. So media entertainment, enterprise, education, government, and broadcast. Those are the 5 verticals. So let's get right into the pricing. Every year I do a survey, and this year I did the survey in March. I kept the survey open for about a month, so all the data was collected in March of this year. I broke out qualified responses based on small customers, less than 100K a year, and large customers who are more than 100K. And you'll see on the following slides how I broke out the tier. For those that want this information right away, I'll publish this tonight at cdnpricing.com. So you don't have to try and write it all down. I'll have it up at CDN Pricing. I'll put it up tonight once I leave here. And I have to redirect the domain CDN Pricing, but by tomorrow morning, if you go to CDN Pricing, you'll see it there. So 408 qualified responses, more than 100, 317 were less than 100K, again, only for video delivery. These were the survey questions that I asked. Which industry vertical are you in? What's your contract length? When did you last renew your contract? Is your CDN contract bundled with other non-video related services? Very important. And we'll talk about that in a little while. How much has your price for video declined year over year? How much do you spend a year for video delivery? What do you pay per month on a per gig delivered or per megabit sustained model? And which CDN vendors do you use? So let's go to the big spenders here. 32 customers spent more than $1 million a year of those that took our survey. 22 customers were using Akamai, 16 Level 3, and 12 in Limelight, and 1 in Amazon, all in a multi-vendor approach. So this is something we've seen for many years, is a lot of the largest customers out there, think Netflix, Major League Baseball, Hulu, a lot of these guys use multiple CDN vendors. I haven't seen any data in the market to show that more companies are switching to multi-vendor or more companies are switching away from multi-vendor. It really depends on what type of content the content owner is delivering, what region of the world it's in, where their service is offered, what device it's on. But it's not uncommon that you see up here so many of these customers using multi-vendor. That's pretty common for the largest guys. The other thing is you'll see 22 customers actually have their contract bundled with other non-video services. Makes a lot of sense. If you're a content owner and you're taking small object, large object, maybe streaming, live, you're taking 4 or 5 different types of CDN services, you don't want to price per service. So instead of paying on a per gig delivered model at the end of the month, you're paying on every gig you've delivered, you're paying on a per megabit sustained model, or what we call 95.5 or 95th percentile in the industry. So the vendors are rolling up all these different CDN services together and giving you one price per meg sustained. It's a very simple and easy way to do it. The good news for the vendors is that because they can roll all the pricing together, they're not comparing apples to apples anymore, video to video. So their pricing doesn't have to be as low for video as it used to be. And when you bundle products and services together, ones that have a high margin and a low margin, you get a much better meeting in the middle. So this is something that we're seeing more and more of. Some of the CDN vendors have actually publicly stated on their earnings calls what percentage of their contracts are bundled versus non-bundled. And you'll see just in the last 2 years, a lot have moved to bundled. I would estimate that of all the customers I talk to, probably, especially the large ones, 60% of them are being priced on a per meg sustained model. Most contracts are also 12 months in length for video contracts, but the moment you start doing bundling with other services, I'm starting to see a lot of 18 months, and you still have some 24. But most video contracts are still 12 months in length. So on pricing, for these customers in particular, pricing was down 18.9% this year when compared to last year's contract. Now, that number might surprise some of you because it might seem so low, but that's right where it should be. In 2009, pricing fell 45% on average. In 2010, it fell 25%. In 2011, it fell 20%. And this year, I think I estimated back in February, it would drop between 15 and 20%. Now, why is that? Well, for starters, the CDNs have to make money, and most of them aren't. Most of them are not making money purely with the video delivery business that they're doing today because it's the economics of scale. They have to spend so much money to build out the capacity, then they have to go and fill it. So it's very hard for them to make money specifically on video. And that's why you're seeing a lot of CDNs in particular over the last, let's say, 12 to 18 months move to what you call value-add services in the market. Guys like Akamai have been selling value-add services for years. Other CDNs were slower to follow. So CDNs right now are trying to diversify their revenue away from video, which has become commoditized. Now, CDNs hate it when I say that word, commoditized, but let's be honest with ourselves. Video delivery is commoditized. YouTube does it for free. What's not commoditized is performance and reach. But the actual act of delivering bits across a network, 2012 marks the 17th year, I believe, since some of the first CDNs like Sandpiper were out on the internet doing this. It's not new, it's not cutting edge, it's not rocket science, it's not as hard as some CDNs make it out to be. So that process is commoditized. The performance and scale isn't. The other issue with pricing is that pricing dropped so heavily over the last couple of years that a lot of CDNs tell me privately that they can't go much lower in some of these deals. You know, they're not making money or they're breaking even, especially in some of the larger deals. Think the guys like Netflix and Hulu, Major League Baseball, ones that are really big, they're very good at driving down pricing. They're also very, very technical. They know what they're delivering. They know where they're delivering it. They have internal teams that measure quality. They use third-party services in the market, Conviva and others to measure quality. So they drive a hard bargain, and they get a good price. So CDNs can't lower pricing too much more because, again, it's economics of scale. The more bits you push on the network, the faster you get them on the network, the cheaper the internal CDN's cost per bit goes down. But overall, the price still goes up because it's based on volume. So I think when all is said and done at the end of this year, I think pricing will probably be down on average more around 15% as opposed to 20%. So let's go to the next sentence. On average, customers expect traffic to grow 126.6% this year over last year. So if you look at those two numbers, you're saying, man, this is a great year for the CDNs. Pricing's down 20, traffic's up 126%. Here's the problem. We don't know what percentage of customers make up what percentage of revenue on the CDN's network. We also don't know what percentage of their customers make up what percentage of their overall video traffic. So if you have 10 customers that make up 50% of your revenue from video on the network, these numbers get skewed because they're not the average customer. The average customer isn't going to see traffic growth of 126% this year, which you'll see on the next slides. So on paper, it looks like the industry is going to grow huge this year because of the 20% and the 126%. However, of the 408 customers, was it? Only 32 of them were spending more than $1 million a year. You'll see on the next slide how that changes. An average customer doing 3 petabytes a month is paying a low of 1 cent per gig delivered and a high of about 3 cents. The pricing I have up now from Q4 of 2011 at cdnpricing.com, you'll see that now. Pricing's down just a little bit, but not much. You can see from Q4 to Q2, it's pretty flat. And you'll also hear in the earnings call, Akamai, Limelight, both recently at earnings call, they said that for the most part, pricing was pretty stable. It's pretty flat. We're not seeing huge fluctuations. On average, a customer doing 400 megs a month is paying a low of 2 megs sustained and a high of 4. So the moment we go to here, these are customers 253 who are spending $250K to $500 per year. Jump right down to their average traffic growth, 48%. These are the majority of the customers on CDN's networks, the smaller customers. There's only so many Netflixes of the world. Well, there's no other Netflixes of the world except maybe Google, and they do that themselves. But if you think about the largest guys out there, Netflix, Hulu, Major League Baseball, NHL, NBA, think CBS, Fox, the major broadcasters, there's probably 15 companies who are in that size, and everybody else is smaller. So of these 253 customers, on average, pricing was only down 11.4% this year for them, but traffic is only growing 48%. So very different from the larger customers. You also see here that Akamai dominated with 120 customers. Level 3 had 62. Highwinds had some. Then Limelight and Level 3 and multi-vendor. You had Edgecast in here. 216 customers didn't have their contract bundled with other non-video CDN services. That's pretty interesting. Over the next 18 months, we're going to see that change because as more services come to the market across more CDNs, like Amazon announcing DSA today, more CDNs are offering more in the way of products. DSA, FEO, front-end optimization, dynamic site acceleration, all these other services, you're going to start seeing customers bundling contracts for them, and that's a good thing. So I bet a year from now, these numbers will be quite different. 202 customers have contracts 12 months in length, so pretty large majority of them. 500 gig to 1 terabyte a month commit was paying a low of 2 cents per gig delivered and a high of 6 cents. That's pricing that's almost completely flat from Q4 pricing. 200 megabit a month customers paying a low of 6 and a high of 11. I actually saw some that was in the 14 to 15 range. So per meg pricing for a customer of this size it's more all over the map than it is for per gig delivered. Now let's go to customers who are spending between 100 and 250K a year. Again, you see Akamai has the majority of them, not surprising. I mean, they're just the largest in the market. Interesting in that 35 customers are using a combination of Limelight, Level 3, Amazon, and Edgecast. So you still have customers doing the multi-vendor approach. You're pretty split here on bundling contracts. Half have them, half don't have them. Now look at pricing here. Pricing is down only 10.6% this year, and traffic they expect to grow at 73.3%. This is averages weighted across everybody. But again, you'll see the difference between pricing and traffic. These customers are paying a low of 4 cents per gig and a high of 12. The 6 cents per gig average, that's not taking 4 to 12 and figuring out the average. That was just looking through all of the data. 6 cents was the average that I saw most often. I'm actually going to show you all the data, the actual raw data in a minute. And I will not be providing the raw data afterwards. I know I'll get a lot of those questions. So few customers are paying on a per meg delivered model of this size that I actually didn't have enough data to provide pricing on it. Almost everything is a per gig delivered model. Now let's go to additional findings. So customers spending less than 100K per year, I don't think less of those customers. There's more of the customers who are smaller and medium than the larger customers. It's just that if you're spending less than 100K a year, let's say 50 to 100K, pricing is all over the map. It's really, really hard to come up with an average because the bucket of commit of bandwidth is really small. And also, when you're that small of a customer, you probably don't need a CDN. There's plenty of what I call regional service providers in the market. The term CDN is so generic these days, I don't know what a CDN really is anymore. And also, some vendors like to fight with me on who I classify as a CDN and who I don't. I don't classify anybody. Customers classify who is considered a CDN. When they send out an RFP and they say it's going to these three CDNs, they defined who a CDN is, not me. So I'm going based on RFPs. But there's a lot of regional service providers in the market. There's a lot of really small guys who do a great job of delivering content in one particular region, like North America or just Europe or just Asia. So you don't always need a global CDN. You don't always need a CDN that delivers content everywhere. Netflix is a good example. Before Netflix expanded outside the U.S., they didn't need a global CDN because they didn't have the rights to deliver content outside North America. So it's about delivering the right content to the right user in the right location on the right device. And many times regional service providers do a very good job of that at a fraction of the cost of a CDN, especially for services like video. For customers spending under 100K per year, Amazon dominated with more than half of the contracts in terms of when I asked which CDN did they use, followed by Edgecast, Limelight, Level 3, and Highwinds. There were also a lot of companies buying CDN services through resellers. So I didn't ask who they were using or who the reseller was using, so there would definitely be other companies on here. But these size customers, resellers are something that is big. A lot of times they're buying it through an online video platform, an Uala, Bright Cove, Kaltura type company. Across all 725 responses, 6 customers were using AT&T and 7 customers were using Verizon. The reason I put that in here is I get so many questions, and we're going to talk a little bit about telcos and carriers. And a lot of people have the idea that telcos and carriers are going to disrupt the market and put CDNs out of business tomorrow. It's not going to happen. They are going to have an impact on the market. I know you've heard a lot today about things like CDN Federation. I'm going to talk a little bit about my thoughts on that, but I just wanted to put it out there that, for all the reports that I see that network operators are getting into the business and they're going to crush another company or put someone out of business or replace them. Here's a total of 725 customers, and combined AT&T and Verizon were only 13. So AT&T, Verizon, they have a long way to go before they're actually disrupting the market. If they disrupt it, they've both been in the market a long time. There's still a question mark as to whether or not what they're going to do, what their services are going to look like. But they're definitely not disrupting the market today. I'm going to give out a couple quick URLs These URLs will take you to specific posts on my blog because I get asked all the time, who are the CDNs or what's the pricing? If you go to cdnlist.com, this is going to take you to all the CDNs that I track in the market. So CDN list, here's what I call Pure-Play Cdns. These are guys who are just in the business of CDN. They're not doing co-location, they're not selling transit, they're not doing managed services or web hosting for the most part. They're pure, what I call Pure-Play Cdns. This is also a history of the CDN space. I also listed all of the companies dating back to Sandpiper, either when they went out of business, which unfortunately is a lot of the CDNs over the last 10 years, or who they got acquired by and when, with links to when they got acquired and the price. So you'll see there used to be a huge list of CDN vendors in the space, and the ones in bold are the only ones left. And some of these are just regional. For instance, Prime Networks is only in Asia. So there's very, very few left. And I need to update this. This is from July of last year. Then I have what I call non-Pure-Play CDNs. Telcos, carriers, guys like Level 3 and AT&T who do something other than CDN. Typically, these are companies where CDN is not their core business. It's a very small fraction of their overall revenue. So then you have all of those guys. And then I have CDN management platforms. So those who are selling licensed and managed CDN solutions to carriers, telcos, and others who want to build it themselves, as well as transparent caching platforms. And I need to add a couple new guys in here. So that's cdnlist.com. If you go to cdnmarket.com, this will take you to what data I publish every year on the actual size of the CDN market, broken out based on region and based on video. So one of the things that I really didn't like about the industry was that a lot of analysts and firms put out reports that say the size of the CDN market is $6 billion. That's wonderful, except the report doesn't tell us what regions of the world are the drivers, what the industry growth drivers are. They don't say what CDN is. Is that cloud? Is it software downloads? What type of CDN? So they don't break out region, they don't break out type, they don't break out protocol, they don't break out device. So in addition to my role at streamingmedia.com and blogging, I'm also a principal analyst at Frost & Sullivan, going on, I guess, about 3.5 years now. 99% of everything I work on, the public never sees. Companies come to us and say, we're thinking of entering a new market. Is there an opportunity there? What is the size of the market? What are customers looking for? So most of the work I do, nobody sees except that company. However, every year I put out a couple reports to the industry. CDN, transparent caching, enterprise video, webcasting, and online video platforms. So for the last couple years, I've been putting out pricing in a report that breaks down what the actual video market revenues are stripped out of overall CDN. So when you hear CDN is $6, $7, $8 billion, video is not even $1 billion today. So every year I project what that's going to be. Right now I have it projecting that it's going to be middle of 2013. Well, no, about 2013 is when it's $1 billion market. Now this does not include carrier revenue. So this doesn't include any type of federated CDN or those carriers and network operators delivering video on the network themselves. I think actually maybe later this year I'll put out a separate report just on that size of the market. For all the talk of licensed and managed CDN you hear from all the vendors, I've yet to hear a single vendor who's willing to either publicly tell me that I can use or put in the market how big an opportunity they think it is. So you have, Akamai just recently launched licensed managed CDN. Edgecast's been doing it for years. Highwinds has a product. You have all these different companies offering it, but none of them have ever publicly said how big they think the market is. And today it's very small. It's certainly growing, but I think it's important we have some data on that. So that's something I'll be tracking later in the year. If you go to cdnreport.com, this is the actual report that I put out. Frost & Sullivan's business, unlike a lot of other analyst firms, is we don't really sell reports as a one-off. People buy a subscription to our digital media services and they get everything we have. Whereas a lot of others want to say, okay, here you can buy this report for $6,000 or $7,000. That's not really the way we work. However, I will say if anybody wants this report, because I'm up here doing this presentation, email me and I'll send it to you free. It's a PDF. It's maybe 50 or 60 pages. But if you want it, I'll send it. The next one is, I'll mention this one just real quickly, CDNpatents.com. I get a lot of questions about all the different patents around CDN. There's been so many suits over the years. I think this just on the blog dates back to, well, that's '07, but it goes past that. So many of the CDNs have sued one another over the last 15 years, I can't even keep track anymore. But CDN patents will take you to all of the filings, all of my thoughts on the patents, actually looking at some of the patents. I do quite a bit of work as an expert witness involving patents. So I've worked on a lot of patent cases. However, I've never worked on a patent case for any of the CDNs. So all the CDNs who've sued one another, I've never worked for either side of them. I've worked on a lot of cases for the content owners. Think of, you can never talk about the cases you work on, which makes it hard, but think of the AOLs of the world who are delivering a lot of content and are being sued by a lot of companies based on the delivery of video. I've worked on a lot of those cases. So I have reviewed some of these patents. I have some thoughts up on here. However, I'm not a lawyer. I don't pretend to be one, so I don't give out any sort of legal advice around the patents or saying they should or should not be enforced. But I do point out some interesting things there. So that's patents. What am I missing? Content delivery blog. That'll simply take you to all the posts on my blog that are just about content delivery, because I also write about everything in the video ecosystem. How do you create, capture, store, manage, track, monetize, protect, deliver, and report on content? I write about all of that. But content delivery blog will take you directly just to those posts on that. And, of course, you know about cdnsummit.com, so that one's good. Let me just show, we're going to go into questions because I don't want to run out of time. So this is all the raw data from the customers who filled out the report. And it's broken down the first half. The ones that are further spaced out are the ones who were in the 408, and then the ones closer together were the 300 or some odd. So this is all the information we're collecting, and then I have this information going back the last couple years as well, because we do the survey every year. And we typically get on average between 800 to 1,200 responses every time we do the survey. Qualified ones, there's quite a few that have to be thrown out. But that gives you an idea just in terms of the raw data. So with that, I'm going to go into questions, I think. Let me just see if there's anything else. No, that was it. So I'm going to go into questions for about 15 minutes, and then we're going to have food and drinks. So who's got the first question? Colby, what do you got?
So if you think about the hosting space where AWS really cut its teeth, they've done a great job of reducing pricing and being very innovative, yet there's still a decent amount of other hosting companies that are successful, operating on their own platform. So think of companies like Carpathia or something like Software, et cetera. When you think of the announcement that they just made today to focus more on the dynamic site acceleration segment of CDNs, do you think that they're going to basically take over the market, or do you think that there's still going to be an opportunity for other guys to have meaningful market share as well?
So the question is, will Amazon's dynamic site acceleration service, which they talked about today, disrupt the market, take over the market? So a couple things. One, I'll only speak to that of what I can, because a lot of the companies give me briefings off the record of what they're working on, products that are coming out, additional features and functionality. So, I'll talk to what I can today. Here's the thing with Amazon. Amazon is all about going to the market with a product that is easy to use and is mass market. So Amazon doesn't want to enter the market if there's a potential to reach 3,000 customers. It's too small. They want to go after the broadest set of customers possible, which means that they're targeting the mid-sized customer. If you look at who their customer list is, they showed PBS and some of the larger customers, but they have over 22,000 customers, I think they said this morning. So if you had 22,000 customers and think that if they were all the size of, large companies paying $1 million a year, they'd be doing a lot more in terms of revenue. So a lot of their customers are obviously small and medium-sized, and the fact that we saw in the survey data that they dominated customers spending under $100K is evident of that. That said, I think Amazon's completely underestimated, especially by your group on Wall Street, by Wall Street in general, because Wall Street tends to look at Amazon and say, oh, they're only going after small customers. Well, they started off going after small customers, and they started off offering a service that was really bare bones. But within a 2-year period, they lowered pricing. I'd have to look on their blog. It's like 10 times in 2 years they lowered pricing. They added streaming. They added RTMPE. They added RTSP. They added Flash Media Server. They added content protection. I mean, they added all these features and functionality in 2 years. So to your question, DSA starts off today as what they have, but we should expect that DSA is really going to grow as a product, feature and functionality-wise over time, which also means clearly they're going to want to enter additional markets and verticals that they're not in today. So DSA is a disruptor simply because they're not charging more for it. They're charging the same price for streaming, for small object, for DSA. They really don't care. And the other CDNs typically charge more for DSA or other services like that because they call them value-add services. Their margins are higher. So will Amazon go out and take 25% of the market tomorrow or in the next year? No, not going to happen. However, what they're going to do is they're going to put pressure on all the other CDNs. So a good example is Contendo. When Contendo was in the market, Contendo came into the market within 2 years, put so much pressure on Akamai that Akamai acquired them. However, Contendo only did $24 million in revenue last year. Now, did Contendo go and take a huge amount of Akamai's business? No, they took very little. But customers used Contendo's pricing as a negotiation tool against Akamai. So that same thing's going to happen with Amazon. Customers are going to use it as a negotiation tool, even if the performance and the features and functionality aren't on par with other CDNs. So it will push pressure. It will put pressure on the other CDNs, and it will lower pricing in the market. But it's not going to lower it overnight. There's not going to be a huge surge of market share loss from one CDN to another. It's going to be gradual over a long period of time. Next question, Michael.
So big numbers in terms of capacity growth. I know it's 126% in the high end, 40 to 48 if it's mid, 70 something. So when I just look back to your notes from last year, I think the expectations were for 40 to 50% growth. Actually down prior years as well. So what are your, first of all, do you think that's a good number, that 126? And what do you think is really driving that if it is? Even 70%.
So what do I think about the numbers we saw and what's driving it on the growth side? Well, I have no reason to not believe the numbers. I mean, it's data we've collected. People have no reason to lie when they fill that stuff out. Everybody who filled it out gets a copy of the report automatically with the data, so it's in their best interest. The problem is, I've always given out at cdnpricing.com average pricing. And the moment you throw in the customers who are spending millions of dollars a year, they're no longer the average customer, and they skew the numbers. That's why this time I broke it out based on small, medium, and large. I do believe the 100+% growth for the largest customers. The problem is the pricing going to stay at the 20% that we're seeing right now? Because we're only 5 months through the year. And we've seen all of a sudden in one quarter, some CDNs will decide they have to slash pricing. Or they'll slash pricing because they want to get more revenue that particular quarter. And in Q4, we also see strange stuff. I mean, I see really weird stuff, especially in the last 45 days of the year. I see contracts coming in and out that have pricing where it's like, whoa, wait, what did you do? And then, I'll talk to the CDN, and they're like, well, we're only doing it the last 30 days because it's the end of the year. So 5 months into the year, it's a little hard to say that pricing is going to stay at 18 to 20%, but I do think, on average, that's what it's going to stay at. I think I predicted 15% in January or February, just from talking to content owners. So I think pricing stays pretty stable for video. We've also seen some of the CDNs, say in their earnings calls that, look, we can't spend the kind of CapEx dollars we were spending previously to support large customers who have a lot of traffic growth for video but aren't paying a lot of money. It's we're breaking even there, and we're spending a lot of CapEx and a lot of resources to do that. So that's something we've seen as a shift as well. Some CDNs aren't necessarily spending as much money as they have in previous years specific to video infrastructure. So from what I can tell, yeah, the numbers seem legit. The question is what percentage of those customers, how many of those customers make up what percentage of the CDN's revenue? And that we don't know. To date, I don't know of any CDN that will publicly either go on record or allow me to go on record to say how many customers they have. We don't know how many customers any of the CDNs have. We know their total customer count, but that doesn't tell us what products and services they're taking. We don't know what percentage of their traffic passed on their network is video. We don't know how many total streams they delivered this year over last year and what the growth was. And they don't break that out because they don't want the Wall Street guys to figure out their P&L per product. And that's pretty standard. None of the CDNs have really ever broken that out, except if you go back to the iBeam and Digital Island days, 8-10 years ago, those guys did. And most of those guys also didn't last more than maybe 2 years. So maybe that was part of the problem too. But yeah, so far I think the numbers are accurate. Next question. Yes?
Dan, do you anticipate much market share changes including the top tier, Akamai, level 3, Limelight?
Do I anticipate market share changes at the top level? Akamai, Limelight.
Perhaps.
And do I see what?
Are you seeing those sort of market share shifts already in the last?
It's a great question. Do I see market share shifts or do I see changes between Akamai, Limelight, level 3, Edgecast? I don't honestly know because I don't know what percentage of total contracts in the market I'm seeing. If I collect data from 800 customers, is that 10% of the market, 50%? I really don't know. I certainly at times see share shifts on large contracts, but again, large contracts aren't the majority. What we do see consolidation-wise is if you look back the last really 15 years of this industry, there's almost never been more than 4 CDNs that have controlled probably 85% of the whole market. And today you pretty much have that as well. Years ago you had Spadera and others. Right now you only have really 4 or 5 providers that control the vast market share. If you look at CDNlist.com, there's a lot of guys up there. Many of them are very small, or they're a telco and carrier that's just not doing a lot of revenue today. So I don't see a big change. I think there's going to be more acquisitions like we've seen as of late going to other services. So you've seen Akamai buy Blaze, Contendo. You've seen Limelight buy Aptimize. Rackspace bought, I can't remember who. You're seeing a lot of those deals. You're seeing a lot of CDNs tie up with transparent caching. We saw more this morning. We saw an announcement, 2 announcements, I think. I do think we'll still have some acquisitions on those services, dynamic site acceleration, front-end optimization. But actual core CDNs, people always ask me who's going to buy Akamai. I don't know. Ask the Wall Street guys in the room. Most of the CDNs are pretty expensive, and the ones that aren't pretty expensive are fairly cheap. But so far, even though they're fairly cheap, they're cheap in terms of their market cap. It's small. Yet, no telco or carriers bought them. Why is that? Well, most telcos and carriers don't truly want to get into the space yet. So I don't think we'll see any consolidation soon of the big guys at all. Next question. You got time for a couple more questions. Yes?
Do you see any momentum or change on the mobile delivery? The CDN would specialize.
So the question is, do I see any change in mobile content delivery? Specific to video? The problem with mobile video delivery in the U.S. is it's just there's not a lot taking place. Your region of the world there is. Outside the U.S., of course, there's more in the way of standards. Mobile adoption is higher. The problem with mobile video is the carriers don't want us as consumers to consume video across 3G or 4G, so they cap you at 2 gigs. So they're giving you an incentive not to use more video. That's not to say guys like Major League Baseball and others aren't seeing a huge amount of growth with video to mobile, but they have a product that's unique and different. It's focused, it's premium, they get paid for it, and most of their growth on mobile traffic is not the video, but the actual apps. So in the U.S., I've never been a big fan of mobile. I've never really seen it take off. If you talk to some of the content owners I do, I'll ask them, think of some of the big guys, content owners, and I don't mean Netflix. I mean think of the Viacoms of the world, the Fox, CBS. I ask them, of all the content you have for the PC, what percentage of that can be viewed on mobile? 5%, 10% at the most is what they tell me. Because it costs so much money to prep all that content for mobile devices that are so different in the fragmentation of the market. For those who are going to be here tomorrow or Wednesday at the Stream Media East show, we've set up on the other side here something called the Broadband Device Pavilion, which is I took every device I have at home, every connected TV, streaming box, gaming console, and 26 tablets. And we set them all up on the show floor, and everybody can come get hands-on with them for free, test every service. And then I put Netflix, Hulu, HBO, Major League Baseball, NHL, Vudu. I put all those services on every device so you can actually go see how they work. Most of them don't work too well. I mean, it's really fragmented. The quality's not great. Major League Baseball, which is one of the best services in the market. 10 years they've been doing this. Do you know that their service only works on 4 tablets? That's it. When you ask them why, they say fragmentation, Android 2.3, 2.3.1. Every single tablet needs a different app, and you have to develop it differently. So if you're a consumer and you pick up a tablet and you think, now I get access to all this video content, and you find out there's no app for it, that's not a great consumer experience, especially when your ISP then says, well, you can only use 2 gigs a month, and then you're paying $10 a gig after. So I'm not a big fan of mobile video. I know I've been saying that for years, but so far we just don't see a lot of adoption. A couple more questions, and then it's time for drinks. Yes, sir, in the back.
Do you collect any data on advertising revenues and subscriber revenues, which I'm assuming is costs? So are you seeing broadly profit from the CDN customers?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the question is, am I collecting data on advertising revenue and premium subscription revenue, it sounds like, that tie back into these costs? I do to a degree. Keep in mind that a lot of the data I'm given, though, by content owners I can never share. Probably 50% of all the data I'm just given in general I can never share. Content owners will talk about, some of them talk publicly, the MLBs and others talk publicly about how many subscribers they have. They'll talk about how many total hours the person's viewing per month on average. Advertising-wise, no. Online video advertising is one of the biggest hyped things in this industry today. We've been hearing about that for so many years, and I understand it's growing, but you look at every report in the market, and they say, it's X billions of dollars, and the next year they come out and say, well, we projected too high, so we're cutting it in half. So these market reports are getting chopped in half by $500 million to $1 billion every year. Also, every time I go to MSNBC or CNN, I get the same ad delivered 8 times when I watch 8 different videos. So there's so many problems with online video advertising. And think of the premium subscription services today. Netflix paid, Hulu partially paid, Major League Baseball paid, NHL paid, Vudu paid. Most of them are all paid. So the free ad-supported models, Hulu's actually done a pretty good job with that, and we know how much money they're making because they actually talk about it. Or we know how much revenue they're pulling in. But the others, they're typically never willing to talk about that. So I don't have data I can correlate back to this and compare, as an underlying data. No, that I don't have. Other questions? 1 or 2 more. Yes, sir, in the back. What do I see the difference between live video pricing and on-demand? I don't. Yeah, I mean, any CDN that's charging more for live versus on-demand, there's an issue there. Now, if they're charging you more for live because you're doing RTMP on a flash media server, okay, I can understand that. There's still some licensing issues there. It's more expensive for them. But everything's moving HTTP over time, which is good for the customer, you guys in the room, for customers, and it's good for the CDNs. It used to be that CDNs had to have a server set up just for flash streaming, and then one just for Reel, and then one just for Microsoft. So they were deploying all these proprietary servers all over their network, and then that server could only be used for that specific type of content in that format. Now that everything's moving to HTTP delivery, they can use all that infrastructure that they have to deliver other objects via HTTP, small, large. It's cheaper. It's easier for them to maintain. They know the HTTP protocol much better. It's a standard. Most of the other protocols aren't really standards. So I don't really see a big difference in live versus on-demand. Regional service providers, maybe. If you're spending $500 a month, there's probably a difference because you're using a smaller provider. I'm going to end with just a couple comments. I'll stay here and answer questions, and then we're going to have drinks and hors d'oeuvres next door. So just a couple things I want to end with. One, There is still way too much hype, noise, and nonsense in the CDN market that's been reported on. So when you're talking to a content delivery network, when you're talking to maybe a member of the media, the first thing you have to ask is, what do they really know about CDN? Right now, there's all these terms in the market. Edge. You're edge distributed. You're at the core. You're next generation CDN. There's all this marketing terms that all the CDNs use, which really don't mean anything. There's too much emphasis today on who's at the core, who's at the edge, and who isn't. Most of these companies never define what the edge is. And just because you're in the edge, you're in the local last mile and the local ISP, doesn't mean better performance. Quantity doesn't equal quality. That's another thing in the space. So you really have to talk to customers. Customers are the ones who understand true performance. There's also third-party services out there like Conviva and others that measure true performance, not just on the backbone. A lot of the measurement services, Keynote, Gomez, and others, they measure backbone performance. That is not real-world measurements. We don't go to the backbone to get to the internet. We go to our internet service provider. So very simple for those who don't understand. Being on the backbone would be like driving on the highway. So most of the testing for all these CDN services, they're testing the highway. However, most of us to get to our house don't take the highway. We go on the highway and then we take the local roads. So to do true testing, you have to test the last mile. Most of the tests you see out there, CDNs don't do that. So I'm always asked, well, which CDN is better? Which one performs better? Where's all the data on it? It doesn't exist. What you have to do as a customer is you have to go and create your own metric to measure performance and then work with the CDNs to do that. But the number one thing I always say is test the CDN. Upload some files, put something on their network, run your own performance test, see what it actually works like, see how it actually performs. These days, the CDNs are very good about working with customers. When I first started this session 5 or 6 years ago, I had the leading CDNs up here, and I was asking them what they were pricing and how this all worked, and none of them would say anything. None of them would speak. None of them would give out ranges. They wouldn't give out numbers, nothing. So that's when I just took them all off, and I decided to do it myself. 5 years later, they've come a long way. They're very good now at helping customers in the market. So that's good to see. The CDNs as a whole, in the last 2 to 3 years have done a really, really good job of educating the market. But the thing they have to do now is educate the customers on these new services. Front-end optimization, dynamic site acceleration, transparent caching to some degree, licensed and managed CDN, mobile content acceleration, app acceleration. Part of the reason I put those terminologies in the program was so people would start to get familiar with them. So the good news is the CDN market is getting a lot better. So with that, we're going to have drinks next door. We're going to have appetizers. I'll stay here and answer questions, but I'm going to be moving over there to drinks. So please join us. Thank you.